Okay. As you know, we're going to be reading one of those dusty old books this month, and the book of Second Chronicles. So I want to take the next 5 minutes to orient you to this Old Testament book. So the first thing I want to do is to look at where this book of the Old Testament falls on the timeline of Jewish history. So just as a review, the first 17 books of the Old Testament are the historical books, and it lays down the timeline for the entire Old Testament, starting with Genesis through Esther. That lays down our whole timeline for the Old Testament. And in this timeline, you see the story of God's people and his plan, from the creation in the book of Genesis, through the Egyptian enslavement, and then the deliverance by Moses, then through the conquering of the promised land under Joshua, through the period of the judges, then through the period of the kings, through the civil war that split Israel into two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, and then through being exiled to Babylon because of continual rebellion, and then through their return to Jerusalem after their exile, where they awaited the promised Messiah. So 2 Chronicles, where does it fall on that timeline? It falls during the period of the kings, and it covers the time period beginning with the ascension to the throne of King David's son, Solomon. And it takes us up to the Babylonian captivity when they went into exile. So that's the timeline for 2 Chronicles. And we don't know who the chronicler was, but it was written down during the period after the exile when the Jews began to return to Jerusalem, perhaps by Ezra the priest, but we don't know. So the focus of this book is on the descendants of David and tracks through the southern kingdom of Judah rather than paralleling the tracking through the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom like some of the other books do. It focuses on the descendants of David and tracks through the southern kingdom. In this book, you will cover the following course of events as you read. The establishment of Solomon's throne, which initiated the fulfillment of a covenant that God had made with David regarding the throne. And you'll see the building of the temple using the plans that God gave to David. You'll see the splitting of the kingdom under Solomon's son, King Rehoboam. And then you'll see the Levites flocking to the southern kingdom so that they could continue their temple duties. You'll see cycles of righteousness and then corruption, depending on whether the king followed God or rebelled against God. And then finally, the conquest by the Babylonians. As the walls around Jerusalem are torn down, the temple's destroyed, and the people are carried off into exile. So what's the big idea in this book? Well, the Jews returning to Jerusalem after 70 years of exile needed a reminder or a refresher course on what happened, who God is and how he works, and how faithfulness is rewarded and betrayal is judged. So as the Jews returned to rebuild and reestablish, history served as a reminder to follow their God. Their history served as a reminder to follow their God who is faithful and holy and worthy to be worshiped and praised. So as you read, try to put yourself into their shoes. Try to see with their eyes. God wants us to remember his works and to be encouraged by the display of his character through his works. So look for that. Look for the way God shows himself in his works in the book of 2 Chronicles.